And we're live. Coming from New York City. I'm just kidding. This is the Almost Famous show, and I'm truly honored today to have a very distinguished person in my studios and gracing us with her charisma, her smarts, and her beauty. This lady, if you must be living under a rock if you've never heard of the great Brando. But guess what? For a lot of musicians, a lot of people out there that love rock and roll, the king of rock, Mr. Elvis Presley, didn't only have one daughter. It's rumored that he had maybe, I think, 2 or 3, but we're going to talk about that right now. But we have the great Deborah Presley Brando in the house.
Thank you.
It's good to see you once
That's
again.
very sweet. Thank you.
Super, super honored to have you here. And, as you know, we've been trying to get you in, but then a series of things have happened.
Yes.
And then you were asked to go to different shows. So you had like a whole, you had a lot on your plate at the time, but you finally made time for us, and we couldn't be happier.
I'm
so thank you so
happy.
much.
Well, thank you for
Deborah.
having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So, you celebrated a birthday, so happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
And we happen to be Pisces, so
Yep.
Pisces rule, right? We rule the world.
Right. That's right.
We're very intuitive, and
everybody should be a Pisces.
Right. Yeah. So maybe you guys can well, they could have a rebirth.
Well, that is what happens.
Yeah. Right. Technically, they can.
Yeah.
So they call them Renaissance people.
Yes, that's true. It's true.
So we have the whole night, but honest to God, we're gonna have you come back for parts. This is gonna be an episodic kind of a deal.
Exciting.
And I'm totally thrilled. Because I was telling you about my wife and I went to Vegas, and we went to was it the Continental Hotel where you had a residency? Intercontinental, I think it's what it was at once upon a time. And I felt his presence there. But get this. Then there was the time when I had a dream sequence, and in my dream, Elvis looked right into my eyes. And I felt the depths of Elvis. I said, oh my God, this is crazy that I got. And I told my girl, babe, I felt Elvis. I saw him, and he looked right through me, and his eyes were piercing and looked into honestly, I felt like it looked right through me, through my soul. And we talked about that. So I'm really, really thrilled, and I want to know, let's unpack so much too on Spool here. But I want to talk about, when does Deborah Brando Presley, you're also married to Christian Brando.
Yes, I was.
Oh my God, this is fantastic, a huge Brando. Who doesn't like Brando, right?
True.
But let's talk about, when do you find out that Elvis is your father? Because I understand you didn't know most of your childhood and teenage years. You didn't know because mom was protecting you, right? And protecting perhaps Elvis as well.
Yeah, totally.
So your book is, by the way, you guys got to pick up the Memoirs of a Starseed.
My book, which is my life story, Memoirs of a Starseed Child, Elvis, Marlon, Christian, and me. You can get it through Amazon or anywhere books are sold, or at my website, which is deborahpresley.com.
That's fantastic. And pretty soon you will be talking about it, because I'm going to help produce your new podcast.
Yes. I love this so much that, you're going to produce my new podcast. I knew I wanted to have one.
Yeah.
People have been asking me. I just didn't know how, but now I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So God is good.
Yeah,
brings us together, right?
We just got to follow along and see what happens. Yeah, is it interesting?
Ain't that the truth? I want you. So let's back up. In your book, I understand that I understood that much. So your mom. So how long? When did you find out?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that I probably always had an idea. I knew something wasn't right, and I just I didn't look like my other siblings, and I knew that my parents had to get married, that she was pregnant with me, and that was she was 16 years old in 1955, and there was just a missing piece. And so I always sort of had a feeling, and she always talked about my father. She said, oh, he was,
Gushing.
she knew him before he was famous, and I didn't know what famous was, so it's like, I just figured she knew him always, which is pretty much true. But she goes, I knew him before he was famous, and he was one of the kindest souls, most benevolent. She used words that I didn't even understand.
Right, right.
Just such a kind soul, and she knew him before he was famous. That was all that I knew. So by the time I was about 13, I started getting really suspicious.
Mhm.
And she said some things to me, like in a few times when she was upset, like, well, I had to get married, yeah, it was, can you count? And I'd already counted from, the time they got married till my birth, and there weren't enough months. And so I knew, and you don't really want to take that on when you're still a child
Yeah.
and growing. But I confronted her later on when I was 21, and she just burst into tears.
Wow.
She had just had surgery, so she couldn't go anywhere, and, there was a magazine of him laying on the table, and I just walked in because 'cause I'd put it all together finally, and, it's all in the book, but I just confronted her, and the magazine happened to be there, and she's sitting there with gallbladder surgery, and back then, it wasn't lasers. I mean, she couldn't move.
Right, right.
She was down for the
You're
count.
literally under the knife.
She was down for the count, and
Right.
so and I just went in and I picked up the magazine, and a lot led up to this. It didn't just happen that in one
Yeah,
day,
sure.
but I picked up the magazine and I said, "Mama, can I ask you something?" And we were always so close. I mean, I slept with her. I thought we were the same because she never was away from me,
Right,
until I was 16 and got married. But,
right.
I just picked up the magazine and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "Yes," and I pointed to him and I said, "Is this my father?" And she burst
Lost
into
it.
tears,
She lost it
started
completely.
screaming, "Every other one of my children belong to blah, blah, blah." And I was like, she couldn't get up. And so I just went and hugged her and I said, "We'll talk about it later," because I don't know what I expected when I confronted her. I was just all like, 21, and my ego was like, "Yeah, I know it's true and I'm going to go in there." But I never stopped to think what her reaction would be. And it silenced me and it stopped me in my tracks, and I just
Right.
said, "It's okay, mama, I know," because I could see that she felt shame.
Yeah. All those
"Every other
years.
one of my children belong to," and I'm like, so I knew there was an element of shame.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of love, but that was what I got, and I just wanted to protect her.
And that was post your
That was
father's
that
passing, right?
that
Like,
was in February of
sure.
'76, and then I had some encounters with him, which are in the book.
Mhm.
Um, and then on the day that he actually died, um, was getting her divorce, and she was Mormon, so and she had told me in February following that first event that she
Mhm.
would tell me more, when she was divorced, because she was Mormon, been married 21 years, and just wanted the divorce. So on the day she got her divorce, she was driving over to tell me and explain things to me, and it came on the radio that he was dead.
Yeah.
And I never, for 1 second, thought that he would ever die.
Do you believe that he died? Because there's also
No, he didn't.
okay.
He didn't because he was, we know he had a DEA badge, that he went to President Nixon. That's common knowledge, has
Right.
been in movies.
It's a great
But yeah, but he went because he was in Vegas, obviously, and his stepbrothers were given street drugs in Vegas, and
interesting.
like Khrushchev had said that the country would be taken over without firing a shot, through our youth and drugs and this,
It
early
was the 60s or
70s,
early
early
70s, yeah.
70s, and so my father, he his, his hero growing up was Captain Marvel, the hairdo, the capes, and everything, and he honestly bit off more than he could chew. He thought, "Okay, I can get to the bottom of this Vegas drug thing. They're not gonna do this to my brothers." So, Gene told me later that
Gene Smith, his
Gene
cousin,
Smith,
right?
his
Yeah.
cousin, told me that someone had broken into Graceland, cut the head off of Lisa Marie's favorite teddy bear, I think her name was Ada, and put it on the dining room table and said that next time it would be his family. So what's he gonna do? And
Wow.
that's one reason why he's on stage, that he looks really heavy, because he's got on a bulletproof vest. He had a pistol in his boot, and he was scared to death. But what's he going to do? So it got to the point to where there was no choice but for him to go into the witness protection program. And in order to do that, he had to get rid of Elvis Presley, the public figure. And so,
Right.
in order to protect his family,
Yeah, you do
that's
whatever
what
it
he
takes.
did.
Yeah.
And I'm not making this up. This is coming from Gene Smith, who was his first cousin. They were
And
6
driver.
weeks apart. He drove him throughout his career before he became famous. He was there when
With
he
your
met my
mom?
mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like
How old was your mom? Was she 15 or 14 when she
when
met
she
Elvis?
first met him, she was 14, but when she got pregnant with me, she was 16.
16.
And he had just turned 21. As a matter of fact, he was, while I was in the womb, the contract was signed for him with RCA Records, and his parents had to sign his contract. And they thought that once he turned 21, he could make his own decisions, but the colonel was not going to allow him to have a baby with a 16-year-old that was married to a 17-year-old. And
Right.
so he had to choose, between poverty and fame. And I understand why it happened. I mean, it led us to where we are right this moment.
Right. Right.
So everything happens for a reason. But no, he did not die on that particular day.
On that fateful day that people say in 1977, right?
Right. But I didn't know that at the time. And so my mother was coming. Her divorce became final on that day. She was driving over to tell me what she had not told me, over the past months after I confronted her initially. And all of a sudden, I was in North Carolina. I remember looking out the picture window, and she usually drove up this long driveway, and I would run out to meet her because I love my mom, And but all of a sudden, I heard on the radio they said the king is dead,
Wow.
and I never in a million years. And all of a sudden, his music's playing. They're talking about him, and this isn't just the guy in the white jumpsuit. This is my father,
Right.
and he's dead, and my mother's coming to tell me, and it's too late. So I remember watching her drive up the driveway, and I remember standing at the front door because I really couldn't move, and it was blasting on the radio. My girlfriend had on the radio where we were living, and Mama walked up the front steps, and I opened the door, and I said, "Can you tell me now?" And I said, "Can you tell me now? He's dead." And I will never forget as long as I live. She took both of her hands and put them on my shoulders, looked me straight in the eye, and she said, "Yes, Deborah, it's true, and you have to promise me one thing." And I was like, here's this music, and I said, "Okay, Mama, what is it?" And she said, "You will never do anything to bring any shame to his name." And I knew right then that I had caused great shame to her, but I also knew how much she loved me. And at that moment, I literally fell down on the wooden floor and I started banging my head on the floor because it felt better than what I was feeling in my body and my soul. And I remember her taking her hand and putting it between my head and the floor. And I remember 3 days went by and she laid with me and just like a wave, just was with me through all of that emotion and realizing that it's like I gained and lost a father in one day.
Isn't that something? How insane is that? Wow.
It's a lot, but
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
I was raised to know that I'm God's daughter,
Right.
and that must have been somewhere subconscious because I knew that there was a higher reason for it, and at the time, I knew that he knew everything, but then that all changed when I found out that, that didn't really happen, but that was
Right.
years
Right.
later.
That was years later. And now, so let's back up to give everybody context here. Gene Smith, who's Elvis's cousin, and
First
they're like
cousin.
first cousin, they're only 6 weeks apart,
Mhm.
right? He's with him day in, day out, every step of the way, since your father is not able to drive due to a condition, correct?
Exactly. My father had a sleepwalking condition.
Right.
But the thing is, Jean was born 6 weeks before my father. So their mothers, were pregnant at the same time. They moved from Tupelo to Memphis when they were, I
Right.
think, 13 together.
And they lived at
in the same.
Graceland, correct?
Yeah. No, he didn't live at Graceland, but he lived in the projects where he was living when he met my mother with
Okay.
him before Graceland.
Right.
This is right before
Right
he was
before, yeah.
famous. Right. So So
Right.
they were like brothers, my father had a twin who died at birth, but Jean's 6 weeks older, they grew up together,
Wow, isn't that
and
gnarly? That's
yeah,
that's
so
insane, man, just to wrap my head around that.
right, so his mother said, okay, when he started traveling to do country fairs and stuff,
Yeah,
he can't go by himself. He'll wake up and walk God knows where.
right.
So Gene was basically slept in his room and made sure.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why, as time go on and they talk about all the women he was with. A lot of them will tell you themselves that they just slept with him because he couldn't
He
really
was
sleep by
his true
himself.
love was Barbara Jean, your mama.
Well, yes, I do
That
believe
was
that.
that was his
She
true
broke
love.
his heart, and I never thought about that. And when I met Gene years later,
In the 80s,
in the
right?
80s through a talk show when I made a public plea of anyone who knew my father, and in
Right.
56 when he first came to make his first movie, please call me because I have to find this cousin, because we didn't have the internet then. And my mother got amnesia under pressure, so she wouldn't tell me she told me there was a cousin there, but she wouldn't
Right.
tell me. And it was back then, you couldn't just go punch it in.
I understand. This is pretty an interesting fact that your dad, Elvis, to us, but your father, your pops, he was part of your life early on, right?
Yes.
He was yeah, can you
Yeah,
talk
he
a little bit
was.
about
Now,
that?
I didn't it's funny because up until I was about 4, my mother would leave, the man who raised me, because he was traveling all the time, and she would go, like, to Florida, and but when you're a child, you don't know any different, and I remember him picking me up when I was tiny, and I was so shy, I would bury my head in his neck, and I remember he smelled like baby shampoo like I did, and I
Oh,
later found out he used baby shampoo. His hairdresser told me that, and I'm
wow.
thinking, because I remember, like, the dampness, and I remember him meeting us, and it was dark, and it would be dark, and then he would be there, and then he would also disappear into the darkness, and I didn't think about it then, and I buried a lot of that till I was older,
Yeah,
and I remember him giving me an orange. He picked an orange off a
yeah,
tree and made a hole in the top
yeah,
and made it into a cup, and I thought that was the coolest
yeah,
thing, and, um,
yeah.
and
Ain't
I
that
remember
something?
his father in these red pants that I later got a photograph of him holding me.
That's right. You have a picture of him holding you,
Some
correct?
people try to say that's
Vern,
not me, but it's me. I mean, I remember those dorky shoes because my feet turned in.
your grandpa Vern.
Yeah, but there are people, on the internet who go, "Well, that's not her." I'm like, "Well, I don't know who it is because it sure
Yeah.
has my face."
The
But
computer sleuths will try to, always have their way,
but that's always good. I mean, without that contrast, then what do we have?
Yeah,
So it
right, right,
serves
right,
a
right. Yeah,
purpose.
it sure does. It sells, I mean,
It serves
as
a
you know, it
purpose.
does. But I wanted to also key in on the fact that you met Gene Smith later, and then he legitimizes. He
Yeah.
basically, what does he do in Tennessee? He
He
does a
wrote an
part
affidavit.
affidavit,
Mhm.
right?
He wrote an affidavit for the courts. What happened is, I was doing a lot of talk shows because I was married to a Hollywood hairdresser who sold me out. I didn't know how the media worked or what. I just thought the magazines showed up in the
Yeah,
stores. I didn't know about publishers or journalists or photographers or anything. And one day he came home and said, "I sold your story. You're going to be in Japan tomorrow in a story, and then you're going to be all over the Star and the Enquirer, and here's
right,
$10,000."
right. Wow,
So he sold me out completely. And
right.
then I just
Inquirer,
thought,
still
okay,
remember that.
well, I'm going to have to go with it. So I made friends with the reporters and the photographers. And I was so naive that the first day we took pictures with a man named Phil Ramey, who was a Vietnamese photographer, who's the one who photographed Princess Di and chased her around. And he was
Right.
in a helicopter, the first photographer ever to be in a helicopter. He did it to Sean and Madonna. And he became a really good friend of mine, but he said, "You're gonna be in the Japanese news tomorrow," and I said, "How are you gonna fly there that fast?" And he goes, "There's a thing called a facsimile machine." I didn't even know what a fax
The fax machine.
so
They still use
embarrassing.
them, They're not completely obsolete. I mean, they're still used.
But they had just come out back
Wow.
1988, and I didn't know what it
It was like
was.
a huge thing back in the day. It was like a big old apparatus. Um, so let's talk about also, you didn't, okay, wait, I want to also like ask you, did you ever go to an Elvis concert?
Reluctantly, yes, and before I actually put all the pieces together, this was the in '76. And my aunt, who was the sister of the man who raised me,
Don?
Don, bless him, asked me to go to a concert with him. And she said, "We're going to go to the airport, to a private airport, and
Uh-huh.
he's coming in, and let's go get you something to wear." And I'm a Mormon mama with 2 babies, and I never go anywhere. I watch Newzoo Review. I'm in bed by 8, and she wants to take me to a private airport. And I remember I wanted a flowy dress I could wear to church forever and be thrifty. And she put me in this skin tight red silk jumpsuits, and I was couldn't breathe. And I remember I went, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be here. My husband wasn't thrilled.
Mhm.
And so I remember sitting in the back corner of this airport thinking, look at all those women. And there was a plate glass window where the plane came in. I didn't even know we had private airports in Charlotte.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea what this was. And,
Yeah.
and it was, and then I was sitting in the back by myself, and this man comes over, and I looked up, and he had the bluest eyes I'd ever seen. And I'm sitting there thinking, look at all those women. They're like a bunch of flies and they're all like babbling. And how weird is it? They're all here to see this person that I hear on the radio that my mother knew before he was famous. And this is really weird.
Right.
And so it was Colonel Parker.
Colonel Parker,
And
an
he set
infamous
me
Colonel
down.
Parker.
He set me down. And I swear to God, his eyes were like robin's eggs. Joan Baez song. But
I
I
like Joan
remember,
Baez. I like her. I dig
I love
her.
her too. But
San Francisco, right?
he,
Folk singer.
yeah,
She
exactly.
did this thing with
Bob Dylan.
right.
His eggs. She was his eggs. That's who she
Yeah.
was talking to
Yeah.
about his eyes. But
Yeah.
but that's what I was thinking of when I
Mhm.
saw, and it's almost like he hypnotized me because he's sitting there beside me for like an hour,
Mhm.
and my aunt is over there in the corner going, "What's going on?" I'm
Holy
like, I
cow.
don't know. And he
Kind of
wanted to know my name, and then I later found out that he was he was trying to find out if I knew.
a little cringeworthy, huh? Like this grown man sitting
Yeah,
next to
but
his younger girl.
he knew who I was, and I think he was trying to find out how much I knew.
Right.
'Cause I said,
Right.
"Look, I'm just a Mormon mo with 2 kids, and my mom did know him before, but he knew a lot more than I knew that he knew, because I didn't
Wow.
even know at that point. That was months before." And so the next morning, my aunt had stayed at the hotel where he was staying, and I thought, "This is so weird." And she said, "I need some shampoo." And I didn't know that fancy hotels had shampoo already
Yeah.
there. So I'm
Right.
driving it over to her. She's trying to get me there. So I get there. All these people are in the lobby, and James Burton, his guitar player, and they're like talking to me when I'm trying to get in and out of there as fast as possible. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, actually about 1:30, and I took my aunt the shampoo, and I had my 2 and 3-year-old daughters in car seats with my sister, and my car that we parked underneath the hotel, and I just wanted to get out of there. So I go get in my car, get out of that, and I still can't figure out what all the fuss is about. It's like I'd never seen anything like it.
Right. It's a circus.
It's a circus, and he was nowhere there, right? So I'm leaving, and all of a sudden there's a black limousine, and he is in it, and he is right in front of me when I'm pulling out of the parking lot.
Wow.
And
What's going through your
everybody
mind?
else is I'm thinking it was like a magnet was pulling me. I could not take my foot off the gas. I was staying as close to the back of his limousine as I could. And there was an officer with a motorcycle cop that I had seen before because my aunt knew everybody who was, like, around
Right.
him when he came.
And now your daughter's a police officer, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that
close
wild?
enough. She's
Yeah.
close enough. Yeah,
Mhm.
she's, working on it. She's got a few more steps, but she, but the officer was going, "Move," so he could get between the cars, and I was like, "I can't," and then I remember pulling up beside him, and I saw his face, and it was like a baby's face, and I
Oh,
hadn't seen him now since I was about 4. It was all buried,
right.
and now I'm 21. Now I was gonna be 21 a few days later. It was, President's Weekend, '76, and I remember following him to the Coliseum a few blocks down the road thinking, "Those people are nuts at the hotel. They have no clue that he is long gone," right? Which was the story of his life. And so I pulled up to the Coliseum, and I got out of the car, and he was literally for about 10 to 12 feet from me. He gets out of the car. All of a sudden, like a swarm of bees go around him of men that were one head. He was a head taller than all of them, and they're like pushing him. And I went, "Elvis." And he turned around and looked at me, and our eyes locked. And if I had been a fan or something, I would have run up to him for an autograph or something, but I literally froze. And I put my hands on the car, and I just like stopped, and I thought, and he kept his eyes on my eyes while they pushed him into the
It's like a
Coliseum.
father daughter moment that forever
It
lives
was
in
a
your heart.
soul it's a soul connection that
Yeah.
transcends everything else that happened
It's
because
otherworldly.
yeah,
Wow.
and I'm his and he's mine no matter what was in between us, and I didn't know what and then he went back to Memphis, and 3 days later, he wrote that will, and in the will, he leaves everything to Lisa Marie,
Mhm.
which his hairdresser gave to me, which is in the book. He leaves everything to Lisa Marie and any other lawful issue I might have to be divided into separate and equal
Wait a minute. Wait
trusts.
a minute.
Well, I'm not legal because my mother married somebody else.
Right.
So after I go to court in Memphis with Gene, they ruled, okay, you're not illegal, but am I legitimate? And I just gave up the war because they
Yeah.
conceded in court that I'm his legitimate daughter. I mean, I'm his biological daughter, but I have no inheritable rights because I'm not
Out of
born in
wedlock.
wedlock.
Yeah. Out
Because
of
I was born
wedlock.
in wedlock to somebody else.
Right. Right. To
So
Don.
that I still love, yeah.
Uh,
And
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
yeah,
interject. I just want
so
to ask you something real quick, but go
okay,
ahead.
ask me.
It begs the question about like, did you did you have any relationship, or if at all, or did you ever even speak to your late sister Priscilla Presley?
You mean Lisa
Lisa
Marie?
Marie. Sorry,
I
Lisa
sure
Marie.
did speak to her, and I have photographs in my phone of me and Priscilla not too long
I
ago.
want to see that.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not gonna show them to the world because 'cause they're going in the
Right.
book,
Right.
but I'll
Yeah.
show
They're
it
going
to
to
you
the same
before we
book.
leave.
Sounds cool.
Did I send it to you?
No, you haven't yet, but you did
I
mention
haven't sent it
something.
to
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
This is
She
great.
was at the
I'm
Hollywood
privy to
show,
it. Okay.
and
Okay.
I was there too. I had
Right.
to get
Right.
her
And you're
permission.
going to be in the next Hollywood
I'm gonna be
show.
in the next Hollywood show, which is in Burbank. We'll
Yeah.
talk about it next time, but that'll be in June. But
Okay.
so were so many other people. Like they had the whole cast of Dallas there. That's why
Yeah.
Priscilla was there.
Yeah.
They have all the old shows you love. All of the
Sure.
people
Like
are
the
still
chips
there.
and they all turn out, right?
Everybody. Engelbert
Yeah.
Humperdinck was there, and Margaret was there.
So my girl and I, we follow the German in Venice, the GIV,
Yeah.
the YouTuber, and he always pops up in places like this. So many other YouTubers. I'm always interested in trying to turn out. We're gonna go to yours,
Come.
okay? We will
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
It's a lot to cover.
Yeah. Go on. I
Okay, I
just
forgot what I
sorry
was
I
saying now.
interjected.
I forgot what I was saying.
You were saying okay.
Uh,
So your
oh,
sister,
Lisa Marie.
yeah.
All right, so I went on a talk show, like I said, and I made a public plea. I said, okay, it was Good Morning LA. I said, if anybody knew my father when he was here, please contact me because I need to find this cousin.
Right.
Very next day, I was working on Falcon Crest, which was,
Okay.
and I had this I was an extra. So, because I never really wanted to be like a star. I just
It's
like,
fun to do extra work.
it's fun to do
Yeah.
extra work, and I love the way it works and behind the cameras. I love that, but I don't like to
Yeah.
be the center of attention. So I was
Right.
an extra, and I remember sitting there, and this woman comes over and hands me very next day after the show on Good Morning LA,
Yeah.
hands me a card and goes, "This woman knew your father when he first arrived." Her name
Interesting.
was Nan Robinson. She'd been married to Edgar G. Robinson's son, Eddie
Wow.
Jr.,
Right.
Hollywood royalty at that time,
Yeah.
before Marlon.
Yeah.
And I called her, and she put me in touch with Gene.
Wow.
And so I
That's
went to
something.
her apartment, and she had loved my father. And she was good friends. She was a stand-in for Tuesday Whale too, and she had met him on. But she put me with my cousin, who instantly, he said, "I know she's real," but he said, "Do one thing." He goes, "Check her palate." And so I felt like a horse at auction. Like she said, looking at my knuckles, she goes, "Oh, he's got it. She's got his hands. She's got his
Yeah. Right.
knuckles."
Right.
'Cause
Right.
she used to rub his hands a lot. He used to
Get it.
love to have his hands,
Yeah.
so she had done that with him.
Uh
And
huh.
and then she did, and she stuck her finger. And dentists have told me my whole life I have a child's palate.
Right.
You can't fit two fingers in there. It was
Okay.
kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But she said, "Yeah, I can't even get one finger in her palate."
Oh my
But he already knew anyway, but that was pretty funny.
It was.
And he
Wow.
loved me, and when I went to meet him in Memphis, I'll never forget that, when he walked into the restaurant, we were like magnets, and I had a cold, a little bit of a runny nose, and I've been flying, and he wouldn't even sit across from me. He had to sit
Oh.
beside me,
Right.
touching me, and, like, I remember him
Oh.
taking his finger and, he just told me, he said, "I'm just so sorry that things turned out the way they did, but, we couldn't be more proud of you,"
Yeah.
and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
it's true. He was the
Yeah.
closest that I had to him, and he did go to
Yeah.
court with me,
Yeah.
and Priscilla had told, the other relatives that if anybody accepted me publicly, they'd be
Yeah.
cut from the payroll.
Right, right, right.
And that's right when Graceland had just opened as a
Yeah.
museum or whatever it is.
Have you been there? I'm sure you have,
Yeah,
right?
the press sent me there. Nobody's home. And the first time I went, my uncle Vester was the guard there, and he had a magazine that I was in sitting right on, and we were supposed to be sneaking in so we
Yeah.
could get photographs for the Enquirer.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
sure.
remember saying, I don't want to do this because I didn't. But then when I did go through the house, I literally remembered in my grandmother's bedroom
Right.
being on the other side of that bedroom with her holding me in her arms.
Right, because your
I had
mom used to
memories,
go
and
there, right?
I remember, and then I had flashes of my father walking down that driveway
Uh-huh.
when I was tiny with a horse, with a little pony for me. So
Oh.
all this stuff I'd buried because,
Right, right, sure.
when she's with him, it's like,
Yeah.
"You didn't see this," and I'm too
Yeah.
little to even formulate sentences, let alone forget
Now,
what I'm forgetting.
an interesting fact is that your mom, Barbara Jean, God rest her soul, was good friends with your grandmother, right?
Yes. As a
And
matter of fact, back then, we didn't have cell phones, so my father would call my grandmother every day. So my mother would call and tell my grandmother what was going on, and she was the liaison.
okay, the middle
She loved her
person,
because
yeah.
my mother was very much like my father's mother. She was very sensual and beautiful and talented and showed off, loved dancing and singing, and
Sure.
they went to church for that.
Right,
But she also was very spiritual, and
right,
spirituality and sensuality are very hard to find.
right,
And that's what he was looking for all of
right.
his life.
Yeah,
Because he couldn't be with my mom because she's with someone else and Mormon and sealed and all that.
yeah.
But with even Priscilla says, that she used to put on her lingerie and he would just want to read the Bible. And
Right.
I'm like, why don't you read the Bible first?
Yeah.
It's like if you're that good of an actress, you need to figure it out. But
Do you what do you call it? You've met Priscilla, as I understand.
yes, and with Lisa Marie, back to that. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was married to a hairdresser in Hollywood, and he had a client that was Stephanie Powers' niece, actually,
Oh, the
and
Powers family.
and she was a next door neighbor. Her name was Leanna. She was next door neighbor to Lisa Marie since childhood, and her father owned the Beverly Hills a car dealership that my
Sure.
father would buy fleets of cars from. So Joey, my husband, did Leanna's hair, and she had brought Lisa Marie in one day. And he told me that Lisa was very kind of aloof, but she
Hmm.
did sort of calm down and, enjoyed his humor, but sort of, guarded. And so Leanna was telling me later that her uncle was managing my dead father in Hawaii. Mhm. Her stepfather, Antonio, was in Florida with my father,
Wow.
and then that's how I got the record deal. But my thing is, Leanna gave
Interesting.
me Lisa Marie's phone number,
Wow.
and I would call her. Remember that Mexican hat dance that was like number one?
Yeah.
Can you do the sound?
Uh, What? Because I'm
Yeah,
Mexican.
exactly. No, no, just because you might
Da-da-da-da.
remember, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
very distinct,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really the greatest song, but she had
Yeah.
that on her answering machine,
Oh,
and
yeah.
she was living on Wilshire Boulevard in an apartment. So anyway, I called her and I said, "Look, please call me back.
Yeah.
I'm your sister." And my friend Leanna said she had seen Lisa Marie with one of my stories, and Lisa said, "Well, what if she really is my sister? She kind of looks like me." So I knew there was a minute of vulnerability, but it didn't last long.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But she
so
was younger,
she
so
was
she was.
20
Yeah.
and she
Yeah.
was Scientology and she was fighting with
Yeah.
her mother. And if you read her book, you know what she was going through at that
Yeah.
time.
Sure.
And here's me in court trying to get half, right?
Wow.
Or
Yeah.
at least, that's what the will said. So anyway,
Right. Right.
and
Sure.
she knew I was going to
And it was
court.
rightfully yours. I mean,
Yeah,
it
well,
should have.
shoulda,
Anyway.
woulda, coulda.
Yeah.
So I inherited everything but the money. But
Music.
anyway,
You're musically also inclined, right?
yeah,
Like,
but I don't like to show off. But yeah, I do, and it's a daily part of my life. I mean,
yeah.
I listen from it's on the radio. I mean, I can't even driving over here. It's like
Yeah.
it's what it's the buffer between us and the real world.
Right.
Always. It
Right.
just
Right.
even when my mother died. But back to Lisa Marie. So back then, you had to call the operator to make an emergency call.
Yeah.
She broke in on my phone call,
That's right. I
and
remember
I
that.
took the call, and I'll never forget as long as I live. She goes, This is Lisa Marie." She goes, "This is Elvis's daughter." She goes, "What do you want?" And I said, "I would like to talk to you." And she goes, "I don't care about you. I don't care about your life."
Wow.
I don't care. And I felt like someone hit me in the stomach. She goes, I don't care about your life. Do you understand me, Deborah? I don't care about your life. And I'm like, whoa. I said, how can you be his daughter and talk to me like that?
Right.
I said, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. You're your mother's daughter. Because I really knew that was not coming from our side, okay?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I said, can you just calm down? I have blood test. And I just had a story in the Sun magazine in London. I knew she was
Yeah.
mad about that. And I said, can you just calm down? I said, the blood tests are out. Can you just wait till they get back and then we'll talk? She goes, over my dead body, tests don't mean anything. She goes, do you understand? You'll never get anything. And that was our conversation. But as the years went by, we had a third party mutual friend that was close to my father after he went into this thing.
As luck would have it.
As luck would have it. And so she always knew what I was doing. I always knew what she was doing. I got pissed off because I noticed she started dressing kind of like me. It's like weird. And I thought, you know, this isn't the way she always wears like little suits. And now she's wearing like my bracelets. It's like, but I did see a little of that. And then when she started recording, she asked this mutual friend, all she wanted, she said, all I want from you, because I said, what can I do? You know, this
Yeah.
is like when she just had her last album out, her first album out. I was so proud of that record. And she said, I just want you to stand beside me in my music. And she invited me to the Wilton Theater.
Wow.
I didn't put this in the book yet. I didn't, for the next one, or maybe
The next
never.
book, yeah.
So much is never in any book.
Yeah.
But I remember I was driving to see her, and I started thinking, what if she skits us out and won't let me in? What if I get there and my daughter and she didn't keep her word? I'm not going to let that happen. And I didn't go. And I don't have any regrets, but if I did, that might be one.
Yeah, probably most likely because she's now passed on.
But I think everything happens for a reason.
She's crossed over. Yeah, absolutely. Everything does happen for a
But
reason.
she knew I loved her. She believed in reincarnation, just like she says in her book. She thought she was Marie Antoinette, which is interesting. But I knew on a soul level, because of her Scientology upbringing, that she knew a little bit more than most people about reality.
Wow. And so she has, funny thing is, you know, we're talking about Lisa Marie, your sister, who has a connection to you. Besides the obvious, she's your half sister, or she was your half sister. She was also married to Michael Jackson,
who was like a son to Marlon. He called Marlon Pops. I have letters.
And my cousin, Ricky Rebel, who I had on the show recently, who was a singer. Fantastic singer, I might add. He was also he was friends with Michael Jackson. Well, they signed him to the MJJ record label, which was insane.
It's such a small world, and
really
as you and I have just
since
we've been talking, we have so much in common, and that's true. And then Christian's brother, was Miko was Michael Jackson's bodyguard for many years.
For a long time.
He's the one who rescued him when he caught on fire in the Pepsi commercial.
I remember that.
'89, I think. He's the one who saved him.
That's right.
He was with him the very last night when he died.
You need to come back for part 2 because we're almost all out of time. We need to do part 2, and then we're going to start your podcast, and I'll help produce the show, as we said. Let's talk about real quick, and almost
the magazine?
the close. Yeah, the essence of Elvis.
Yeah, this is something I just want to share. I have a friend in Australia, and I had
just bring it in. Bring in the mic closer.
I had friends in Australia, and I've always had sort of not sure how I felt about the ETAs, they're called.
Yeah.
But, you know, they put their heart and souls into it. And this is a book about them that just came out in Australia. It's called The Essence of Elvis. We can order it. And they did a huge story on me, which I loved. And talks about the book. And here's Jean's affidavit, my children. Here's a picture of me and my father. We look just alike when I'm 10.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's just, you know, about the book. And a quote of my father's is, the truth is like the sun. You can shut it out for a time, but it ain't going away.
That's right.
And then my quote, which just came out in the middle of a conversation, which I love now, is, one day I hope the truth is louder than the lies.
Wow.
So this is a little magazine.
This is fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, one more. Deborah Brando Presley, you guys. Once again, let's talk about real quick, your book. Where can they find your book? And
My
what's
book is called Memoirs of a Starseed Child, Elvis, Marlon, Christian, and me. And it's not so much about them as about my entire life and my spiritual journey, which is, the reason why I'm here. And the reason I wrote the book, because I want to continue this even in the new podcast, just
right?
because we need it now more than ever. We are all
Absolutely.
of divine origin.
Amen
That
to that.
simple. Yeah.
And guys, it's a true honor, and thank you, so gracious
Thank
to
you.
come on the
Thank
show,
you.
and obviously you come back to we could talk more about Brando, of your husband, also
Yes.
Christian, and all the stuff that happened that people don't
Yes, that
know.
he did not
Yeah,
really kill anyone, he took the blame with the detective,
there you
yeah.
go. So that's
Yeah,
that. Want to leave you with that.
he was not a killer, he
And
was a hero.
isn't that insane?
Makes me
And
cry.
yeah, I really have got to tell you very few times the weird things happen because we actually had to stop the programming as we're streaming. We had in real time, we had to stop because something just supernatural took place. And
Hard
then
drive died.
hard drive just shut down out of nowhere, so we had to stop. But I want to, a shout out to C, who runs this wonderful podcast, District
Precious.
23 podcast, pretty fabulous. And your book, once again, it's on Amazon.
It's
Pick
on
it up,
Amazon or at any bookstore.
or on
Or
your.
on my website, which is deborahpresley.com, and I will sign a copy and send it to you. And thank you very much.
That's my show, guys. What more can I ask for? We had such a great time here, and unfortunately, I don't know where time goes.
I don't know either.
Till next time, you have to do this again, okay?
Yes,
We'll
I'm
do
looking
this.
forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Okay,
Deborah.
thank you.
God bless you
Bye.
guys. That's my show. Let's take it home.